Kevin O'Leary. Michael Chong. And Deepak Obhrai.
This is slightly more exciting than the previous ones, Eric.
It's a bit of a raucous crowd. They're very excited about this foursome here.
This is a good matchup.
It will be interesting to see how Scheer is going to go after O'Leary, because Scheer has criticized O'Leary for not being
Candidates, welcome.
Right, and for not being around a lot, too.
You may have
Chong
seen in that last session.
Chong and O'Leary are fairly progressive. Would that be fair?
on the social issues. So it'll be interesting to see if they'll agree on that, or Chong will try to differentiate himself from Kevin O'Leary, because Kevin O'Leary has positioned himself socially as maybe one of the more liberal candidates on this race.
Oh, and this is good. This is leadership in the resource sector, so we'll see whether there'll be different viewpoints on this for sure. Michael Chong is in favor of a carbon tax, for instance, right? So
he's going to hear it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's listen in.
In prices and therefore in investments have been very damaging. Two of the major challenges facing the resource sectors are the necessity of dealing more responsibly and proactively with the interests and the concerns of Aboriginal Canadians and addressing the environmental concerns which accompany resource development everywhere in Canada. So the first question I'm going to ask you, what measures specifically would you propose to address the concerns of Aboriginal peoples with respect to resource development and to make them partners rather than adversaries in the development of natural resources in this country? And we'll start with Andrew Scheer this time.
Well, as someone who represents a Western province, I'm very aware of the important role that the natural resource sector plays in our economy. And nothing drives me more crazy than when I see people chaining themselves to trees in British Columbia and protesting all over pipeline development and natural resource developments in this country. But I don't see them protesting up and down the St. Lawrence as tankers full of foreign oil from Saudi Arabia, Venezuela come into this country. So this is a critical issue. We do need to make strategic partnerships with First Nations people, help them integrate into the economy, benefit from these projects. We need to maintain the science-based approach that the previous government adopted, that this current Liberal government is ignoring. It is the safest way to pipelines are the safest way to transport oil. It is the best way to get our natural resources to market, and First Nations people benefit from that economic activity.
Thank you. Nobody wants to intervene? In that case, we go to Mr. Wonderful.
Thank you very much. In this country, there's $129 billion worth of infrastructure and resource-based projects stalled, many of them in court. That represents about $8 billion a year of economic value to this country that we do not accrue. Now, this is tragic. We also have a tremendously bad tone from our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who basically said to an economy in Alberta that generates over 250,000 jobs, the oil sands, that he thought it was time we started thinking about phasing it out. New plan, new plan. How about phasing Justin Trudeau out? That's the plan. Now, regarding First Nations, I was at a fundraiser last week in Vancouver, and I learned of a project called Eagle Spirit, a pipeline that was initiated by leaders in First Nation. They're in China right now trying to raise capital. That's a smart plan. They're going to get a lot more support for that because they originated it. It's time to partner with these leaders that have entrepreneurial spirits and start working together.
I just wanted to do that. Anybody want to intervene? No? Michael Chong.
Well, thanks, Tom, for the question. There's a number of things I think we should do in order to appropriately consult Aboriginal peoples to ensure the construction of new east-west pipelines. I think first we have to ensure that the officials at the National Energy Board are beyond reproach. I think the recent resignations of those officials last fall because of inappropriate meetings with pipeline proponents was unfortunate. I think the government needs to ensure that officials are beyond reproach and have the highest integrity in order to ensure the integrity of this quasi-judicial process. I think the second thing we need to do is we need to ensure that we appropriately consult with Aboriginal peoples as per the court rulings. I think that means an additional 3 to 4 months of consultations. That needs to be a vital part of the process. I think the other thing we need to do is we need to take the politics out of pipeline approval. We need to remove the federal cabinet's ability to make the final decision on pipelines. We don't do that for other major infrastructure projects in this country, and by removing the politics out of this and leaving it to the NEB, will ensure more timely approvals for pipelines. And finally, we need to have a new relationship with Aboriginal peoples.
Great. All clear? Deepak.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Dean of the Conservative Caucus, I very welcome my rookie friends on the stage here. They're doing a great, super job. Give them a big hand of applause. You know. But let's get serious here to the business. We are a resource-rich country. We have resources, ladies and gentlemen, that will prosper Canada. Two things very critically important. A, we got to take them to Tidewater or sell it to the foreign market. Two, we need to have international agreements so we can sell our natural resources across. But to do that, we have to be in partnership. We can't have one Canadian pitting against another Canadian. We need to jointly work with the First Nations, jointly work with the environmental groups. We have to be coming up with solutions that will not go to the courts and the courts putting roadblocks to our pipelines and to infrastructure that will sell our products abroad. So, ladies and gentlemen, very clear, simple. We need to work in partnership with all Canadians.
First intervention goes to Andrew Scheer.
I disagree with Michael on the need for more delays, because those delays are hurting jobs right now in Alberta and Saskatchewan and all along where these pipeline projects could be built. The other thing that we have to tackle in this country, when we talk about First Nations especially, is foreign advocacy money using some of these groups in Canada for political purposes. We don't let foreign money into our election campaigns. I think it's time we take a look at how foreign money influences some of these pipeline proposals and some of these hearings and things like the NEB process.
Michael Chong?
Well, Andrew, with respect, your suggestion would actually lead to further delays, and the proof of that's in the Northern Gateway approval process. Because the government didn't listen to the court, who said we had a duty to consult for an additional 4 months, the entire project approval process was put on ice. And so we need to consult appropriately with Aboriginal peoples. It means an extra 3 or 4 months of consultations. If we don't do that, these pipeline projects will never get approved. So my process, my views on this will lead to more quick approval processes that will actually see the construction of new east-west pipelines.
Deepak, and then Kevin.
Thank you very much. I am on this stage here. I want to thank Preston Manning and a lot of others who were here, because 20 years ago when I first ran for the Reform Party, it was called a racist party. I went to Preston Manning. He said, you come in and make the changes from the inside. So for him, thank you very much, for the others. You know, and I need to bite my tongue here, but I do have to say thank you to Jason Kenney as well, although he's been trying to deport me for the last 20 years. So thank you very much.
Kevin O'Leary.
Pipelines have been misrepresented by those who oppose them. The fact is, got to think big like John A. Macdonald. These are the modern-day railroads. They're also the gateway for fiber optic across this country. Combined together, they become the most safest way to move a very treasured asset in this country. One of the reasons the Chinese have stopped investing and blew off Justin Trudeau when he went there with a bunch of Dragon Den deal offers, they didn't talk the big dollars because they haven't found a way to get their product to the Western market where they can access it.
Kevin, just so you know, there's a fee every time you advertise your show, so the organizers thank you for that. We still have interventions available. Would anybody? Yes, Deepak, and then Andrew.
I will use my time up. No point in wasting my time. But ladies and gentlemen, let me say it quite clearly. You know, we are a resource-rich country. But in the last government, we did infrastructure spending to make sure that our resources go to Tidewater as well as international market. So two very critical important, infrastructure and foreign market. These are the two great infrastructure to make Canada prosper.
Andrew, and then Michael. Well, I disagree with Michael's assessment. That's what was the reason for the delays, but I think it's quite clear the Trudeau government had no intention of approving Northern Gateway. That was a political decision that ignored the evidence. But the question was about First Nations participation in this. And this is so integral because we need to convince Canadians and First Nations, I've got 12 reserves in my riding, that the answer to First Nations issues does not come by adding more zeros to the checks from Ottawa. It has to come from the private sector. It has to come from economic development.
Michael.
I think we as Conservatives need to start a new relationship with Aboriginal peoples. The court has recently ruled that Métis peoples are considered Aboriginal peoples, First Nations, Inuit, and so we have to reset the relationship. I met with Perry Bellegarde as a leadership candidate earlier in this leadership race on a bilateral to say that I'd want to start a new relationship with First Nations. I also met with the Métis Settlement Council of Northern Alberta to talk about their issues. These are really important things if we're going to see the construction of new east-west pipelines.
Thank you. Final word to Kevin O'Leary.
You know, business and developing jobs at the end of the day is that purvey of the private sector. A relationship with First Nations from the private sector, offering them opportunities to create their own businesses, is going to unlock this logjam. To have so many billions of dollars tied up in courts and become a can't-do country, it has to be resolved. It's everybody's self-interest to work this out, including everybody involved in developing jobs in this country. It's actually slowing down our economic development.
Thank you. Let's go on to the second question. We're going to stay in the same area, but as I said at the beginning, there were two important aspects of resource development. One is Aboriginals and how we create partnerships. You've already dealt with that. Let's move on to the other side, the environmental concerns. The environmental concerns, as you know, have created divisions in this country. It's also generational to a certain degree. So what I'd like to ask you is this: what new measures would you propose on environmental protection and conservation, particularly as it relates to the development of natural resources and infrastructure required to move the resources to market? And Deepak, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you. As Andrew Scheer said, you know, many of the NGOs do get money from outside. There is vested interest in there. If we will never get up anywhere with these vested interest people, because it is the bread and butter. But what we really need to do is to talk to people with which you can find common ground on sustainable environment, but at the same time development of resources. In the oil sands, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance to fly, there has been a lot of reclamation of land being done. You know, Canada is the #1 country in the world where we are environmentally friendly. I've traveled all over the world, and I tell you, Canada is the #1 compared to the other countries. And therefore, we have the ability to sell our green technology around the world and environmentally friendly. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we do. Innovation into green technology, and Canada is #1.
Thank you. I just want to point out before we go on to Michael Chong that even though you didn't use your full minute, you don't get those extra 10 seconds added on anywhere else. So, Michael Chong.
Well, thanks, Tom, for the question. If we're going to win the 2019 election, we need to have a credible policy to reduce emissions. The most conservative way, the most economically efficient way, the cheapest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is a revenue-neutral carbon tax. My plan starts with that revenue-neutral carbon tax, and it will allow us to introduce one of the largest income tax cuts in Canadian history, a $18 billion income tax cut that we would introduce in our first budget of the spring of 2020. It is the largest income tax cut proposed by any of the candidates here on stage and the earliest income tax cut. It's a real plan to get both the economy moving and our greenhouse gas reductions in place. It is a true blue conservative plan. It's why Reagan Republicans like James Baker and George Shultz a week and a half ago in the Wall Street Journal wrote an op-ed in support of that very plan. It's why conservatives like Mark Cameron, Prime Minister Harper's former head of policy in the PMO, support it. It is a conservative plan. It's a good plan.
We have an intervention from Deepak. 30 seconds.
Thank you. To my good friend Michael Chong, I have a simple question. Why are you going after carbon tax? Why are you not saying nuclear energy, carbon-free nuclear energy, the route where we can go and have a lower carbon footprint? That is the way to go forward, Mr. Speaker. Sorry.
And 30 seconds is done. Kevin O'Leary, I think you had your hand up, and then Michael Chong. Did you have your hand up?
Question first.
Hey? Oh, yeah, we're not back to that yet. We've got an intervention. Michael.
Well, quite simply, the cheapest way to reduce emissions is a revenue-neutral carbon tax. Any other approach involves bigger government, more regulation, more green subsidies, and more green programs. I'm proposing to eliminate all green programs, green subsidies, green accelerated capital cost allowances, and green initiatives, and replace it with a simple, straight price on carbon through a revenue-neutral federal carbon tax that will allow us to introduce deep income tax cuts.
Great. No more interventions. Kevin O'Leary, 1 minute.
When a politician says revenue neutral carbon tax, that's BS. And I'll tell you why. Let's take our supposedly revenue neutral British Columbian carbon tax. Here are the facts. Premier Clark is milking $500 million out of businesses right now, not giving it back to them. Those are the facts. So it's BS, and I won't stand for it in the O'Leary government. That is ridiculous. Here is the truth. I'm a graduate of environmental studies, one of the first cohorts ever. The whole concept is you've got to manage an economy and grow it at 3% and be a steward for future generations around the economy. Carbon taxes don't work, particularly cap and trade, because very wealthy companies with big balance sheets get to buy credits and continue to pollute, while young companies that can't afford credits innovate, create solutions. It's better to regulate their emissions from the beginning and let everybody keep their capital and create new solutions to emissions.
All right. Intervention, Michael Chong, 30 seconds.
I acknowledge the British Columbia carbon tax isn't perfectly revenue neutral. My carbon tax would be revenue neutral. In fact, we would mandate the Auditor General of Canada produce an annual report on Parliament reporting on and verifying the revenue neutrality of the plan. This is a respected institution, an arm's-length institution that would ensure the revenue neutrality of the plan. The BC model, though, works. They've got the lowest income taxes in Canada, they've reduced emissions compared to a business-as-usual track, and they have the fastest-growing economy several years running. That's the plan we need to adopt across the country.
Intervention, Kevin O'Leary.
Any provincial government that wants to impose a carbon tax under the O'Leary government will simply have it removed from their transfer payment.
Is that it?
I think that's a good point.
Hey, sorry.
You're creating a lot of dead air, but okay.
Can I rebut that before my answer?
Yes, you could rebut. Andrew Scheer.
Okay. Kevin O'Leary has said that he's against a carbon tax, but in an interview, he said that any business owner, anybody who worked for a company that didn't reduce emissions, he would put in jail. So your choice is a Justin Trudeau carbon tax or a Kevin O'Leary carbon jail. I'm against both of them. Now,
And are you done?
now I'd like to answer the... Did I get to answer?
Yeah, in a second. This is chaotic. Deepak. Yeah.
Thank you. I finally get to debate Kevin O'Leary. Let me ask you this question, ladies and gentlemen. Very simple. Mr. O'Leary, you need to know the Constitution of Canada, provincial rights, and federal rights. You cannot come on this stage and start saying, I am going to throw the provinces away. I'm going to do this. Sorry, go and read the Constitution of Canada. They have constitutional rights, and that is very critically important.
You get now to answer the question for 1 minute.
Well, Kevin might know that if he spent more time in Canada, he might be more familiar with that. There is a huge myth about the way our previous government handled pipeline approvals. We built 4 pipelines. We approved and saw those pipelines built. Our system was working. It is the lie of the left that we didn't get those pipelines built. We did. It worked. And you know what? They are the most environmentally friendly way to move natural resources to tidewater. It gets oil off of rail. It frees up capacity for our agricultural products. It's safe, it's secure. And you know, the Liberals, whether it's the Liberal mayor of Montreal who uses pipelines to emit millions of liters of raw sewage into the water, or a Liberal prime minister who politicizes this, we need to go back to a science-based, evidence-based decision-making process which worked, which built those pipelines.
Kevin O'Leary.
Just for the record, I returned to Canada in December of 2010 so my children, who are Canadian, could go to school here and learn what it means to be a Canadian. And the reason I know that is I pay tax in Ontario as a resident to Kathleen Wynne, and it's very, very painful. Bottom line is we've got to make this country more competitive in all of our policies, and the fact that I have international relationships in business is a huge benefit. I'm going to bring a lot of capital back home and tell them Canada is open for business again under an O'Leary government.
Final intervention to Andrew Scheer.
Kevin, with all due respect, you haven't committed to winning a seat. You've made statements like it's your way or the highway. You haven't committed to putting your full time into this. Being leader of the Conservative Party is not a part-time job. Would you hire someone, would you invest in someone who came and pitched you and said, you're only going to do it half-time, you're going to keep all your other enterprises? We need to rebuild this party. We need to regain the trust of Canadians. That is a full-time job. We need 100% commitment from our leader.
You're done. Candidates, great discussion. You're going to have to take the rest of it to the parking lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's round 2 of the breakdown for the 14 candidates. We've gone through 2 so far. That was our second grouping. It was pretty lively. Eric Grenier is in studio with me as well.
We're going to remove one of the podiums.
Okay, they're going to go down to 3 for now. So we're just going to analyze a little bit while we're waiting for them to get organized. That was pretty lively.
Yeah, a little bit of sparks thrown Chong's way towards O'Leary for whether he is in Canada a lot.
Very good, very good.
Pretty much what we would have thought we would see with this foursome here. But it's interesting to see them all going after Kevin O'Leary, a sign that they see him as the real person up there, the real opponent.
And gauging the room is interesting too. I mean, for Michael Chong, any talk of carbon tax, lots of boos. Any talk of, and Andrew Scheer, actually, fairly good reception from that room. I don't know what that tells us, but yeah.
I think that room probably a lot more friendly to Andrew Scheer than Michael Chong, just to begin with.
Probably.